I'm John Lorden, and I've been looking into mysterious occurrences on YouTube since 2015. And joining me today are some friends from Uncovered.com.
I'm Rachel Roslett, a forensic psychologist and head of case research and data at Uncovered.
I'm Andrea Cipriano. I'm also a forensic psychologist. I'm a case researcher and a content creator at Uncovered.
Welcome back to LordanArts Uncovered. And today, we're looking into the unsolved murder of Nicole Coleman. Wikipedia states that Austin, Texas, has been one of the fastest growing large cities in the U.S. since 2010. It's currently estimated to be home to over 1 million Austinites. Residents include a mix of college students, musicians, tech workers, government workers, and blue-collar workers, with an eclectic culture and many, many live music venues. The local small businesses are looking to, quote, keep Austin weird. And many in the community are very proud to do so. 23-year-old Nicole Coleman had a personality as eclectic as Austin, Texas. As you'll see in the details today, she's almost living in two different realities, and these realities come crashing together. Her body being found in a wooded area on New Year's Eve in 2018. Let's turn it over to our case experts to learn more. Rachel, Andrea, how does this timeline come together?
Nicole Diane Coleman was a bright 23-year-old with a hilarious sense of humor, boundless empathy, and compassion that transcended her circumstances. So she was born on March 3rd, 1995. She was the middle child between two sisters. Her family shares that Nicole was delighted by the simple things in life: naps, the ocean, trees, going for long walks, and fireflies. She was a poet. She was deeply spiritual and encouraged her friends and families to be strong in their faith. Her family details in her obituary that Nicole was worried about homeless people. She detested injustice and was always speaking out when she felt someone was mistreated.
When she was a preteen, Nicole struggled with intense onset mental illness, and her family has openly shared with the public that she suffered from a, quote, downward spiral. And that made life really difficult for Nicole and for the whole family.
But when she was a young adult, at about 18 or 19, she started to get better. She was living in Houston and going to Lone Star College. She finished her Associate of Arts degree with a 4.0 GPA. She dreamed of becoming a therapist in hopes of helping others who were battling through similar mental health struggles. She had plans to continue her collegiate experience. Nicole was accepted to Sam Houston and the University of Houston. So over the next few weeks, Nicole and her family made arrangements to start looking for an apartment that she could move out to and then go to school. Her family said she was happy in life and excited about the next chapter.
And Rachel, I just wanted to say, you made a comment earlier about people that take on mental health struggles and how sometimes they will look to become therapists themselves to help other people. Do you have some insight on that?
Yeah. Both Andrea and I have been in psychology. We both have degrees in psychology. And I think we commonly talk about that psychologists are often wounded helpers. They take their own personal experiences and try to turn them outward to help other people because they can relate. So I think it makes us all really good, strong psychologists in that fashion.
Absolutely.
Is there also some aspect of that helps you guys kind of, keep yourselves in check in some way, or understanding what's going on with you by hearing these stories of what other people are going through as well?
Definitely. One thing that I was really thinking about of learning about and researching, Nicole's unique struggle of her going to want to learn to be a therapist to obviously help other people. I think there's also an element to it where it could be that she's trying to learn more about herself and trying to understand about, how she can get herself to be in a really good place.
Of course, on top of that, we have her being very concerned about the homeless community as well, which we know there's a lot of mental health struggles there too. Okay. So what happens?
So Mike Coleman, who is Nicole's father, he writes a post on Facebook, and this is after Nicole was killed. But he writes in that post that during this time in Nicole's life, he says, it fell apart. He writes, quote, "Something switched in your head, and it was like when you were a teenager all over again." Mike also writes that at one point, Nicole went missing for several days. And then she randomly turned it back home, quote, "looking like she had been wandering the streets for days."
With several types of mental health issues, teen years can be particularly troublesome, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Because we've
You have a
already,
mix.
yeah, we've got a
Yeah.
mix of issues plus changes that are going on, plus the usual pressures of being a teenager kind of exacerbating all that. So it's interesting to hear the father say, like, "Oh wow, it's like all of a sudden we're back in that time," you know?
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
During that time, of course, she needed support. So Nicole moved back in with her dad. And Mike details in his post on Facebook that this time of their life was incredibly tough. As many people with mental health illnesses do, she started to self-medicate with drugs. She lost many friendships, so it was a really difficult time for her. He goes on to detail that every time Nicole would leave to go hang out with someone, he would ask her to write the name and the number of the person on a piece of paper to keep with her. Eventually, he said Nicole accumulated a stack of 30 to 40 paper towel sheets with people's information on them, and each one had a different name on them.
That seems like a interesting indicator of what's going on with her socially as well. I mean, we already have her kind of coming to this different area, and then meeting a bunch of people. But you strike up a friendship. Maybe you'll go hang out with the same person a few times a week or something like that. That's not the pattern we're seeing. She's literally new person, new person, new person. Plus,
Right.
we know there might be a chemical dependency or self-medication that's going on around this. That could be part of that circle as well, that she's just, burning through people essentially. Or that's another aspect. Is it that's these relationships aren't holding up for some reason because of her state or because of the experience that she's having with these people? There's some reason why we've got this giant catalog. I hope they kept those paper towels. I hope they were able to use that as in terms of leads for the investigation to reach out to people. But yeah.
Yeah, I also found that very interesting. I don't know that I know 30 to 40 people that could write, names down on a different piece of paper each time. So, it speaks to how worried he was about her and the people that she was meeting, that he felt that, she needed to make a record of who she was going to be with and to keep track of them.
And, one thing that strikes me as interesting in that case as well, this is like 2018 and she's a young adult. So there are cell phones. And to think that instead of creating a contact, in someone's cell phone, in Nicole's phone, the resort of a physical piece of paper that Nicole would carry on her, to me, is almost like it's identification of somebody who she was with. And, it's not her own ID, it's somebody else's. So I don't know if maybe even on his side, there could have been a little bit of mistrust with the people that Nicole was hanging out with at the time.
Just to be clear, there's been no information at all that she has anything to do with sex work.
I didn't find anything.
Okay.
I did not
I just
find
want to put that
anything
out there because I know we've covered cases before. We've actually just released an episode about a case where sometimes, as a matter of safety, like they will do that. They will literally write down the John's name and phone number and like leave it somewhere or leave it with, someone else they're working with or something like that. But not really seeing any indication of that here. And it doesn't seem like there would be a need, but I don't know. Just wanted to touch on that.
No, it's a good hypothesis. We didn't find any indications of that.
Okay.
So continuing on with Mike's Facebook post, he continues to write that Nicole would tell her dad that she knew that something wasn't quite right about her, but she didn't know how to fix it. And so at this point, Nicole was also struggling with thoughts of ending her own life. But she did everything that she could to get better.
And I think in a really brave, courageous thing to do, she checked herself into a mental health facility in Austin in the fall of 2018, where she started to receive treatment for her mental illness. She ended up moving into a group home for women then in December. So she stays in this space with 3 other women, and they're all getting ongoing treatment from mental health facilities in the area. So on Christmas Eve, Nicole speaks to her grandmother, and that is the last time that they would speak.
Yeah, I also found reference to her mother, that time period being the last time that she would start. Basically, Nicole would stop responding to text messages from her mother around Christmas as well. And when you hear things like that, I mean, the first concern I have is, is this a relapse of some kind? Is she starting to pull away from her family because she's getting back into a pattern or a habit that she doesn't want them to be exposed to?
Also, this time of the year can be particularly difficult for people. If she was struggling, I wouldn't be surprised. It could be that, it could be substance abuse issues, but I do know that this is a rough time of the year for people.
Yeah. What happens next, Andrea?
On December 28th of 2018, 2 of her group home roommates, they see Nicole that evening before she leaves to go take a walk over to the Cool Corner gas station. And people in Nicole's life at the time say that going to the gas station was part of her routine and part of her daily activities.
Okay. Well, there is surveillance video from the gas station. Let's go ahead and pull that up, and we'll kind of talk about this a little bit as we're going through it. At 5:26 p.m., Nicole walks through the gas station parking lot. She can be seen wearing a pink and white sweater with a stripe pattern on the sleeves. She's also wearing capri pants that are cuffed right below the knee. For shoes, she's wearing slip-on sandals that appear to be a few sizes too big for her. At 6:07 p.m., we can see her walking through the parking lot one last time before presumably entering the gas station. She's heading right for the door, but then video ends. And that's all we get for it. What do you ladies think about this video?
My first instinct is she's walking a little slowly, but otherwise doesn't seem to be unsteady on her feet. She seems to be going, know where she's going. She doesn't appear to be intoxicated.
Also not in a rush, though. Like, I mean,
No.
I don't get the sense that she's meeting up with someone or on any particular time constraint. Just kind of leisurely, I'm going over here. Like, I'm hanging out. What about, do we think that there's a possibility that she's impaired by anything, or?
Her gait is not, she's walking normally. She does, the first time she comes, I wonder where she's going, because she's walking by the entrance to the gas station.
Yeah.
And going off camera. The second time, she does go inside.
It's interesting you say that. I had a similar thought. And I went on Google Maps and found the gas station.
Yeah, I'll bring that up.
Awesome. And pulling the time frame back to I believe it's like June of 2018 is when they last have it documented. If you take the direction where she's walking in the first video, she walks through the gas station parking lot, and there's actually a porta potty that's there. You could see it, John, right by your cursor. And looking at reviews of the gas station, they don't have a public bathroom. So it's possible that on her walk, she knew that this was a place that she could stop. And also just thinking, it seems in that area, there's really nothing else beyond that direction.
Yeah.
And so that definitely strikes me as interesting. And then in terms of her return, like in the second part of the video by 6 p.m., she's walking from a direction where across the street from the gas station is a bus stop. And I wasn't able to find like the schedule. I saw that it's Route 20 if you're local to the area. There is a bus stop that's like directly across the street that direction.
Right.
And maybe she was just sitting and people watching. It's hard to tell. I mean, I don't know that she doesn't seem to be going in the direction of the bus in the first place. And then to get on and come back within less than an hour. I don't know if that's possible with this route.
Yeah, you're right about kind of local areas to just sit down, though. Like there's not a whole lot in this area. Yeah, so to your point, here is the bus stop that is right across the way. it does look like, I mean, I don't know. All these people could be waiting for the bus, but if you're just hanging out in this area, like where else are you going to go if you just want to sit down? Like there's not a whole lot of options around the actual gas station. I could see people just hanging out here.
Yeah, it's an interesting. That doesn't feel like a neighborhood gas station that you're just walking to. It does feel like it's in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Not on a typical walking route when you're just cruising the neighborhood.
Yeah. But there's, I mean, there's just not a whole lot in this area this time. You got like a auto zone over here, a gas station, a closed up business on this side. Yeah.
So then also thinking about the second half of the video, police did mention that last clip of her reaching for the handle of the door, we don't actually see her go into the store. But police have said that is the last time that we see Nicole on video. And to me, that's really striking because we presume that she goes inside. But, we don't have last footage of when she would leave. And so, it's possible that maybe police do have that footage and are, withholding it for the investigative integrity. Or, it also makes me think, is there maybe another exit where she left the building and that didn't have camera access or something like that? So, I just thought that was very interesting.
It is, yeah. And especially because that camera seems to be covering that front section pretty well. Like I can't imagine that she would be able to sneak out, and not get picked up by that camera. Just doing a quick look at the building, kind of around the building, I'm not seeing another exit. I mean, everything is really front facing. It's all kind of centered around that one door.
Yeah, the gas station in the last clip, didn't look particularly busy either. I think there were 2 cars at the pumps. One guy leaves right before she walks in, but it doesn't appear to be too busy.
Yeah. Well, and if we don't have the footage of her leaving, it just raises an interesting question. I think to your point, it's probably been held back from the public, but then why? Because if there's something as obvious as, oh, she left with a person, well, there's a lead and, there should be some progress. Oh, she got into a vehicle. Well, there's a lead. And that information hasn't been shared publicly. So either they figured out who those leads were and somehow ruled them out, or it's not that clean. There's something else about her leaving that for some reason they're holding back from the public. Maybe there's some additional detail, something she's carrying that was found at the scene, or, something of that nature. I'm not sure.
I think that's a fair and good point that you make about the person or the vehicle seen on the screen may have been cleared and they're trying to prevent those people from being scrutinized. Or it could be the bad guy or the bad woman on there as well. So it's both possibilities of why they could be holding back that footage.
Yeah. All right. So, Andrea, how is she discovered?
So 3 days later on New Year's Eve, we have 2 cyclists who see something suspicious off of Ed Bluestein Boulevard. And this is about a 10-minute walk from the gas station where Nicole was last seen. And one of the cyclists told reporters that he rides his bike through the area along that highway every single day. And this time he was with a friend, and the 2 of them stumble upon what they describe as a bundle of women's clothing that's on the sidewalk.
And they tell the reporter that when they turn their attention to these dense woods that's right next to the sidewalk, one of the men says, "Hey, there's a body over there." Confused and afraid, the other friend asks him to repeat himself, adding, "Are you sure that's a body? Because I'm going to call the police." So the friend doubts himself, of course, believing maybe it's bags of sand. And the men who saw the remains asked his friend to wait, and then he walks down into the woods near the sidewalk. His friend recalls that he said, quote, "He went down a lot farther down and came out running saying, 'Yes, it's a body.'"
So at first, the 2 cyclists, they hesitate to call the police because they were experiencing homelessness at the time. And English was not their first language. So they didn't want to get into any type of trouble. And ultimately, they do report, and they know that reporting is the right thing to do. So the 2 men, they travel up to a nearby gas station. and where they do get help to call 911 to report Nicole's body. And they stick around the entire time and they talk with police as they process the scene.
All right, so let's go ahead and check out some maps here and try to get a better understanding of all this. This is the map hosted at uncovered.com, and it's part of the timeline. And they actually have these pinpoints. If you click on the pinpoint, it'll tell you the association with it. So what we have here is the Cool Corner gas station on this post here. And then next to it, they're noting that pretty close to it is the mental health facility that she's living at. It's an approximate location, but it's saying that reports note that the facility Nicole was staying at was near Manor Road and Northeast Drive. That's exactly where the gas station is. Plus, it makes sense if that's part of her normal daily routine that she's living close to the area. It's across this 183 here where her body is found. And at the time, there is some construction that's going on there. Andrea did find a screenshot from a video of a news segment from back then. And we can see that they've got the crime scene tape out here. We had the description from the cyclists who were homeless themselves, as noted. And they were saying that they noted they saw clothes up on the sidewalk, but then her body was kind of down in this lower area. First thing that strikes me is whoever is trying to conceal her body is not doing a really good job at all. Why are the clothes left there in an area in such close proximity to where she is, and they're able to see her body from up above, essentially, enough that they think something's down there, and then they go down and they verify that it is her body.
And I think that tells us that this person wasn't worried about her body being discovered and people automatically thinking that it was this person that perpetrated that crime. Usually when people are afraid of being tied to the murder person, they try to hide the remains, bury them, put them in difficult to locate places.
And to be honest, it wouldn't have been difficult. Like this, there's tons of brush in this area. Like
Right.
if they just would have carried her in another, 30 feet, it might have made a huge difference in terms of being able to see her.
Absolutely.
But then if you were thinking that much, you would also be smart enough to not leave a bundle of clothes out there.
Yep.
We did run some maps here and use the street view. This is from a picture taken back in March of 2019. And we located the same section, just trying to get a little better sense of what they were saying, how the cyclist story comes together. But you can see there's a lot of construction that's going on in this area. I don't know why you would be walking over to this area during this time. There is another gas station that's a little back here. We've got this Shell station, but they're kind of past that at this point, assuming that they took the roads for walking over here. The roads would have kind of hooped them up around, and then they would come back down this way. So I don't know.
And it's right next to a really busy highway too.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't know that we're not sure that she was walking herself when she got to this spot.
Right. I do want to share one thing that I found that I thought was interesting, and we'll talk more about this later. The idea of a vehicle. Law enforcement does start asking around like the 1-year anniversary if anybody had seen any suspicious vehicles at the gas station or in the area. And to me, it makes me think about a secondary location where Nicole wouldn't have been murdered in this exact spot, but it's where her body was found because it's where essentially she was left. With that highway area, we see that there's a lot of construction on that one side. Since it is that single lane road, a car could not realistically just pull over and block the whole space. So that's something to think about too. You have that big grassy area where maybe if it's dark enough out, you pull the car up into that lot, the grass that's there, and then
right.
So that way you don't look suspicious because there are so many cars that seem to be parked that way anyway with all the construction that's going on.
Yeah, and the ground does seem to ease down from this. So yeah, it would make sense that you would park kind of off here, walk her down. But then what makes less sense is why is the clothing up here? Like it
Right.
really doesn't make a lot of sense. Is it feasible that this is an issue with the homeless community? I'm kind of questioning it because it seems like there was probably a vehicle used where her body was left, but I don't know. What do you think about this?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you mentioned the vehicle part in connection with someone who's experiencing homelessness. It's definitely not uncommon for somebody who is homeless to actually still have a vehicle. And so, in this case, one of the things that really draws my attention is the emphasis on suspicious vehicles. And again, the idea about that the vehicle might have been a primary location of where the crime occurred, and then also a means to move the body. And so something like that, I think, is incredibly interesting. Is there an area that's local where maybe there is an encampment, or where cars can park, where somebody could essentially be living in a car? I think that's something to note too. And then also just thinking about the quote of that Nicole suffered traumatic injuries throughout her body, and also that they recovered items of evidence. The first quote from the police of the traumatic injuries throughout her body, to me, indicates something like overkill. And, we see overkill in crimes where there's a high amount of stress. It's also indicative of somebody who's either an impulsive offender, or also that they were on drugs. Because if you think about, unfortunately, the mechanics of an overkill scene, somebody needs to have a lot of energy. And so that is definitely related to drugs in that sense. And of course, we also see overkill in crimes of passion. But based on what we know about Nicole's circle of people, not knowing or not believing that this is somebody that Nicole would have known, I think it's definitely more the former of an impulsive offender who might have been on something at the time.
Well, you also bring up an interesting point about a homeless person having a vehicle, and would there be anything about that particular area that might take them there? If I just pull up the map again real quick, there's this giant parking lot basically close to where her body is found for the Delco Activity Center. It looks like a local arena, essentially. Not to mention, I mean, we've got neighborhoods and stuff like that, but I don't know if it would be as easy as a big empty parking lot, especially if there was no events going on here at this time. Could this have been possibly where something happened to her, and then you just get right on to Bluestein Boulevard, and then you're dropping her off, like, just really on the other side of the street here?
Having a car as in this case, potentially a primary scene of where the crime would have occurred, it could also help explain why, even though the detectives say that they found items of evidence, that doesn't necessarily mean like DNA or biological evidence. So that could just be a weapon that was left behind. And thinking about, again, if a car is a primary scene of a location, that would definitely have more biological or trace evidence of an offender versus a spot in the woods.
Well, Andrea's background is in criminal profiling. My specialty area was on victimology. So I tend to reflect on Nicole's being and how she was as a person, how that could have affected her risk in this crime. And I think about her empathy and her desire to want to help homeless people. It really could have opened the door wide open for her to be a victim of a random act of violence, right? Because she's probably more willing, perhaps more comfortable to talk with random strangers than, say, you and I might be. So, I just wonder if her empathy backfired on her a little bit at this point and opened her up for a crime that she didn't see coming.
It's really what is going on in those 3 days. We have Christmas where, she's making some contact with family and then it just stops. But we've got her on film 3 days later, just, walking around the gas station. There's something within her life that is shifting in that period, and understanding that might be a key to help understanding this case better. So what happens with the investigation?
Mhm. So police haven't published too many details about the investigation or even the crime scene themselves or itself. They have told the family and media that Nicole's body was discovered nude. Not surprising since we know her clothing items were discovered up at the top of that bridge. But that she also had traumatic injuries throughout her body. Um, Luckily, they have recovered items of evidence. They won't say if she was sexually assaulted before her death, and it's unclear if Nicole knew her killer or if she was a random target.
At 5:49 p.m., police documents detail that they declared Nicole deceased at the scene. And at a press conference on January 2nd, officials described Nicole as a, quote, a high-risk victim. And they further explain this by saying that she's new to the Austin area. Officials do not release Nicole's cause of death, but they do explain that her case was ruled a homicide.
On January 12th, 2019, Nicole's memorial service was held at Cypress Creek Funeral Home. The family had Nicole's remains cremated.
So, at the beginning of the investigation, detectives did look into a possible connection to a nearby aggravated sexual assault that occurred just days before Nicole initially vanished. The location of the other crime was just about a mile away from where Nicole's remains were found. Interestingly, kind of in this direction, but a little bit further east. What happened was an unidentified woman arrived at a park. She noticed an older white male staring at her while he was cooking on a grill. It made her feel uncomfortable, so she moved to a different area of the park. She noticed another man who actually approached the table and began asking her questions about herself. He was trying to strike up conversation. He mentioned some things about himself as well. She decided it was time to get out of there. And when she was leaving, the two men attacked, wrapping a cord around her neck and holding a knife to her throat before sexually assaulting her. However, these men were caught and tried, one of them convicted to 50 years in prison for the attack, or sentenced. Investigators considered that they might be involved with Nicole's attack as well, but within a month of Nicole's investigation starting, Detective Patrick O'Farrell held a press conference and he officially dismissed any connection between the two cases. Another interesting point that kind of bisects these stories, those two men were homeless as well. And just, we know that she's concerned about the homeless. We know she's meeting all these different people. She's only been living in the area for a short period of time. It's homeless people that wind up finding her body as well. There just seems to be this tone resonating through this story time and time again. And if it is in this situation, we're hearing about a crime of opportunity. These guys notice a woman that's in the park alone. If it is that type of situation, it gets really, really difficult to solve this case because you don't have all the connectivity of social and relationships or those other threads that are, traceable. So now we're basically at the point where Austin PD, they need the public's help.
Mm-hmm. And considering Nicole was only in the area for a short period of time, it's proving really difficult to flesh out her possible social circle. And so they haven't named any persons of interest or suspects in the case.
And investigators are asking locals who may have seen anything near the gas station or encountered Nicole to please come forward and talk with the police. They're also asking locals to contact them if they recall whether or not they saw any suspicious vehicles that would have been near the gas station, and to think and recall about what that vehicle might have looked like.
On the 1-year anniversary of Nicole's murder, the family and investigators spoke with reporters for a local news piece. They shared that police have speculated and spoken to the family about the possibility that an additional person may have assisted in moving Nicole's body to a secondary location. Now, what I'm wondering about there is they mentioned a lot of traumatic injuries to her body. If those were injuries where she should have been bleeding, are they noticing that at the location she was found at, there wasn't enough blood at the scene? It didn't look like where the assaults or the attack had happened. So kind of interesting. We might not just have more than one person we're looking for. We might actually have another crime scene, and we don't know if that's been identified by police or not at this point. So how can you help?
First thing you can do is dive in for yourself at uncovered.com's page for the case. The address is on your screen, and we also have a link in the description box below.
And it's there that you can see all of our sources, our timeline, the media in this case, including the gas station surveillance footage.
This case really needs more exposure. So please share this video in our page at Uncovered with any friends or family that you have in the Austin area.
And of course, the biggest help that you can be is if you have some information on this case, please send it in. Get it in the hands of people that can act on it. If you have information on who was around the gas station or particular vehicles of interest, you could submit that information by calling 512-477-3588, or you can also send an email to homicide.apd@austintexas.gov. If for some reason you need to remain anonymous, please contact CrimeStoppers at 512-472-8477 or try using the CrimeStoppers app. Thank you to the Austin Police Department, CBS 42, Fox 7, Spectrum News 1, KVUE, ABC 24, the New York Post, Patch.com, the Austin American Statesman, Daily Mail, the Cypress Creek Funeral Home, the True Crime Diva blog, the True Case Files blog, Web Sleuths, Reddit, and Wikipedia, all for information contributing to today's episode and the profile over at Uncovered. Also, a big thank you to our friends at Uncovered and co-hosts on today's show, Rachel Rosalette and Andrea Cipriano. Please join us again in 2 weeks as we look into another mystery that deserves to be uncovered.